All right, so can the House Financial Services Committee get to the bottom of this whole SVB mess? Let's ask the chair of the committee, the new Republican chair, North Carolina Congressman Patrick McHenry. Pat, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it very much. There's a lot of issues here, and I know there are things you want to say and don't want to say, but I just want to ask you, one of the things bothering me throughout is that the San Francisco Fed, Mary Daly's the president, did not undertake their supervisory role. It's not a regulatory problem. It was a supervisory problem. They didn't. The examiners didn't pick up what was going on with the long duration risk and the mismatch of assets and liabilities that, frankly, a whole lot of people knew for a year. And I got to figure out how the heck is that possible, and how do you get to? Do you call her before your committee? What happens here?
Well, I think that's an operable question. Was it a supervisory problem? Was it a mismanagement problem? I mean, there are some evident things at this period of time, but we've got to get to the bottom of that. And it's my committee that's going to focus on getting to the bottom of it. We have a lot of politicians right now, and actually a bunch of folks in the private sector that are preaching their book. That they're either preaching their politics they've long had, their policies they long had, or trying to position themselves. But my goal, and it's my role, is to get to the bottom of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And the fact is, we know that there was something that was amiss here. When the private sector finds something out before the regulator, it calls into question the regulator's capacity and whether or not they're doing the right thing. We need to get to the bottom of that.
Well, my thought, though, is that the regulator is also the supervisor. There's a difference between regulations and supervision. I worked at the Fed many years ago. And I actually worked in bank supervision for a while. Would you call Mary Daly to get her side of the story? Because I'm not the only guy raising the issue. I mean, by the way, she had First Republic in her district, and they got big problems also, maybe not as bad as SVB. But would you call the Fed president and talk about supervision and examination?
It's in our list of options, but we also want to know who were the supervisors in the bank. What did they see? What did they experience? And what reviews did they give? So we need to get those documents first, and we're going to call the appropriate witnesses at the appropriate time. So this is, in my view, really important that we, instead of do the typical Washington thing, that thing is determine the outcome. We actually want to find out what happened and why, and then fix the problem. What we've seen over the last generation here in Washington is a layering of new regulations without figuring out what the heck happened. We need to get to the bottom of actually the finite causes of this and any kind of changes we need to make in terms of regulation or law to make sure this doesn't happen again.
What's your thinking? What's your thinking about the FDIC guaranteeing uninsured deposits?
Well, in this circumstance, we just got the report today from the Treasury Secretary under operation of law. They have to inform us and describe why they use the systemic risk exception. I think the bold move this weekend was about restoring confidence to our banking system. I think that was appropriate and right. Now, why did we get there, and what are the decisions made over the weekend? We need to get to the bottom of that. Did they have a ready and willing bidder who could have made this week a little less complicated? We don't know the details of that to the full extent that we need to determine whether or not they did the right thing there. But the response Sunday night by the Fed announced things that are fully in the power of the Fed, and the FDIC did things fully within the power of the law creating the FDIC. So I think those things, for these two agencies, they acted appropriately and smartly, which gives us confidence.
Well, as I said before, I've said it again on the show earlier, I think the Fed Treasury lending facility is a very good piece of work. I think that's exactly what the doctor ordered to stop contagion, and I think they're doing it the right way. But what would you feel if we went at some point and had universal use of FDIC guaranteed for uninsured deposits? I mean, you got people talking about that. This is only one bank so far. Other people are saying this is the total nationalization of all banks, et cetera. I'm sure you've heard all the table talk on that. What would your own instinct be for that policy?
Well, I think we have to look at this holistically. Is that really the problem here? Is that really the liquidity challenge here? for institutions, and does that actually fix a challenge in the marketplace? And I think we have to look long and hard on that before we actually jump into something that substantial at this stage of the game.
Are you worried, and I know you're going to have your hearings and so forth, but are you worried about climate change becoming another monetary policy tool? You know, Jay Powell has said no. Mary Daly is not the only one. She says, well, we have to think a lot about that. Larry Summers says that's a terrible idea. You know, this Silicon Valley Bank, they gave 70 grand, 75 grand to Black Lives Matter. That has nothing to do with commercial banking. I mean, you've got some very strange political agendas cropping up for banking institutions, which, let's face it, are in large part backed by the tax-paying public. You worried about that?
Yeah, well, that goes into the basket of mismanagement. Was this bank mismanaged? Were the supervisors doing things that were not correct in their power? So they fall into those natural buckets. Were they doing things that were not essential to the banking business? Were they keeping their eye off the ball? And I think both the regulator, the supervisor, and those running the business, if that's what they were doing, then that calls into question whether or not they were acting appropriately. What we've seen in Washington, especially in this administration, is they want to make all the social agenda a part of banking. And my focus has always been on safety and soundness and the protection of our capital markets to be the envy of the world and our banking system to be the envy of the world. If we're not focused fully on that, then we're not doing the right thing.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your time very much. Really.
Great to be with you.